Welcome back to the STB Podcast. Today on the program, we've got a very special guest, Maurice Jones Drew, former NFL All-Pro running back, All-American at UCLA. Today on the program, Maurice discusses playing for powerhouse De La Salle High School, his humble beginnings in Oakland, California, his special bond and relationship with Eric Bieniemy and his time at UCLA, how he manages his money, and what he does now to fill the void since his playing days are over. This is a very special episode you will not want to miss. Tune in. Secure the Bag content is intended for collegiate athletes. Secure the Bag does not provide financial services, financial planning, investment, tax, legal, or sports agent advice or services. All right, I am excited today to be joined by two-time first-team All-Pro, three-time Pro Bowler, 2011 NFL rushing leader, and first-team All-Pac-12 running back, Maurice Drew. Maurice, how you doing, man? I'm glad to have you on the STB Podcast.
I'm doing well. How's everything going?
Good, man. Good. I met Maurice a couple weeks ago at the NFL Combine and got to spend some time with him and was blown away from the conversation. And I knew we had to get him on. So he's been gracious enough to, in a few short weeks, hop on the podcast. And really, Maurice, I want to start, we'll talk about everything from football to your life after football and growing up. But really the goal of our podcast is to kind of normalize conversations about former athletes, current athletes, in terms of their financial journeys, their spiritual journeys, mental journeys. So we touched on all those things at the Combine. So I'm excited to have you on, man.
Yeah, no, we had a great conversation. So hopefully my experience and the kind of the things that I've went through and are currently going through help others.
Okay, awesome. So my first question is, we talk about where you are now, but where it all began. You grew up in Oakland, right? You grew up in Oakland.
Yeah, I grew up outside of Oakland, a place called Antioch, California. Two-parent household at one point, and my parents split and kind of stayed with my grandparents and bounced around a little bit. And then my mom stabilized and, went to high school, worked her butt off for me, and really encouraged me to kind of go for what I wanted to go for.
Awesome. And what age did your parents split and you went the route of, living, I guess, with your grandparents for a little bit?
Well, I think, I'm trying to think. It might have been 12 or 13. I think I was 7th, 8th grader.
Okay.
And then I went with my grandparents because I went to school 2 cities away. I went to De La Salle, which was a private school. Mm-hmm. And it was easier for my grandpa, who was retired at the time, to take me to and from school. So that's kind of what I did. I got in, I lived with him for my freshman and sophomore year for the most part. Mm-hmm. He would take me to school, and then on the weekends I'd go home and be with my mom and my sister. So, making things work. It takes a village, they say. And that's kind of what that motto was about. And once I was able to start driving, then I lived back in Antioch and drove myself to and from school.
Okay, awesome. What first got you involved in football, and did you play other sports growing up as well? I know you ran track.
Yeah, football was, I started off with flag football. I remember the day I played for it's so funny. I played for this boys and girls club, and they had a flag football league, and first time ever playing, I was pretty good at it. I was faster than most kids, so I did that. And then when I moved to Antioch, we decided, I was like, is there something else I could do? And tackle was kind of the next phase of it. Mm-hmm. And so when I went to play tackle for the first time, it was like intense, right? I remember playing, I remember this like it was yesterday, because I remember like in the summer times I would stay with my grandparents. Mm-hmm. And me and my grandpa had a real close relationship. And he would drive probably like 30 minutes to take me, because he lived in Pinole, which is probably like 30, 40 minutes away from Antioch. So he would drive me to Antioch every day at like 5 o'clock to go to these practices. And back then, it used to be 150 kids at a 9, like the 9 and under, 10 and under football tryout. Mm-hmm. Like I'm talking about legitimate tryout. Like you had to go out there and it was so many kids and you could get lost in the shuffle, and then they would cut and then you'd go on the pads and then they would cut. And so it was like my first time ever in a really ultra competitive atmosphere. And so that's kind of what I did there. I played basketball a little bit. I did a little soccer at one point. Ran track when I got into the 6th grade. But for the most part, like flag football was kind of what I did.
Okay. Awesome. And at what point, you said you were faster than the other kids. At what point was it like up through middle school where you were, what, I guess part of that decision to go to De La Salle is they were a powerhouse and you were probably pretty good at that point?
Being around 150 kids, what I learned was effort was the most important thing. Like you could be fast, but if you're not fast all the time, if you're not giving great effort all the time, it's hard to be seen, right? If you're just fast on one gasser or conditioning or whatever it may be, it doesn't help you. And so when I talk to my boys about it, I always tell them like the way to be seen is by showing effort, right? That's what coaches see. That's what people see. And I remember my grandpa telling me that on the ride from Pinole to Antioch, like, hey, there's a lot of kids out there, like you may want to tighten up.
Yeah.
And so it was a great life lesson for me because, in life you learn so many different things. But at this age, I knew like in order to separate yourself, showing up, being early, working hard, all those little things will help you in the long run.
Okay. Awesome. So tell me, you get to De La Salle, what was that experience like in high school?
Yeah, so so you gotta understand, like I started youth football, I think at 9. By the time I was 13, I kind of created a name for myself and have been playing pretty well in our area. And I wanted to be challenged. And so I could have went to the local high school where I probably would have started and did some different things. But I always wanted to compare myself to the best. For some reason, I've always wanted to be around the best. And it's weird because now that I think about it, I don't know anything different, right? Yeah. I never knew the other way. And so anyways, my mom, my grandpa really pushed me in school to make sure that I had the grades to go. And I got to De La Salle and it was very, very competitive. During that time, I want to say they kind of call it the glory years, at least was what like we never lost a game for 13 years. And I think it was at 9 when I got there, or maybe 8. And then I went through my 4 years and then we won the next year after. We lost 2 years after I left. But DJ Williams.
What year were you?
I was there 99 to 2003.
Okay. All right.
So we'd played Long Beach Poly when I was there, like, but just every day, like you thought you knew what hard work was until you started to work and see guys like have the same mindset as you. And that is what, again, the same thing I learned when I was 9 was effort and attitude and pushing yourself. And you think you pushing yourself to your limits and people are pushing you past your limits, like trying to win everything. It was such a competitive environment, both on the field and in the classroom, because they had certain rules there. If you didn't have a certain GPA or if you weren't, handling your business, like it was hard for you to play. And so I was a very confident kid coming in there as a freshman, got humbled pretty quickly.
Do you remember who was ahead of you? Like any big names?
Oh yeah. I mean, like I had DJ Williams, who went to Denver, first round pick. He was the big name. He was the number 1 player in high school at the time. Kevin Simon, who was a big time player, ended up getting hurt, but got drafted in the 6th round to the Commanders. They were the Redskins at the time, though. They're the Commanders now. I mean, on one team, we had 12 guys go to the pros. Like it was insane. From TJ Ward, who's played and had a really good career, won Super Bowls. Cam Colvin, who was with the Niners for a little bit. Damon Jenkins, who was with the Browns. Derek Landry, who played like 6 or 7 years in the NFL. Matt Gutierrez, who was both with the Patriots and the Chiefs. It was a lot of guys off of that team. Like we were loaded, and we all had the same mindset, right? And I think that was one of the things that allowed me to go on and continue to play. And you'll kind of hear the trend in the deal of like everywhere I went, there was never a situation where I was just the man. I had to earn my right to be that.
Yeah.
And I was so comfortable in doing that from the time I was 9 until I retired. And so it was everything that I envisioned that I wanted. And that's what I did. And so going to De La, it was very, very competitive, like I said. It was, imagine, I'm playing against All-Americans as a sophomore at linebacker. Which in practice every day you're getting just crushed every day, and the coaches are yelling at you and all those things. But then when I got to the games, it was easy because they didn't have those kind of guys on the other side. And so it was very interesting. Tosh Lupoy is another guy that was there who's now the DC. He was a DC for Bama for a while. Now he's the DC in Oregon. Like I said, that there's just all type of guys that were all over. And there were other guys that went to college and had really successful college careers but didn't go to the pros, right? Yeah. So it was just a very, very competitive environment that, you had to be I always tell people like, oh, you're a small fish in a big pond. I'm like, no, I was a big fish in a big pond, right? That's what I wanted to be. And so part of that is going out there and competing and beating guys out for their spot and making yourself better.
Awesome. And I think one of the things that strikes me is we talk about when having a growth mindset and what's needed in order to grow. And I was reading this book that talks about being comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Right. And it sounds like you, from a very young age, innately kind of have that ability, being comfortable, being uncomfortable, and looking to grow, which is a rare thing, and it's become even more rare.
It's funny because we had that talk at the combine, and I remember some of those things, but you are rare, and it is a rare thing to be comfortable in uncomfortable situations, and it makes you feel alone. There's times where, I wish I had a brother, or I wish I had someone who understood that. And those things. And again, like I said, when I was in high school, I had a lot of guys that understood that. And it's always good to be around them because you have similar mindsets. You know what I mean? But that it's not a good feel when you get to college. And then obviously that's where you heard a lot of the conversations were about college. We were at the combine, and I was able to, and it's so funny. We had a small group, and I think there was a couple other guys that are in the NFL coaching or working or playing that had that mindset on that team. And you'll notice, and you've noticed, that when we get together, it's like we never missed a day because that mindset was so important to be able to not flinch or not be afraid of competition or even if you're the 10th back or the whatever you are in your job, to push yourself to being the best. And so, being comfortable, being uncomfortable is definitely something that I've noticed a lot of people in this world aren't used to. And it kind of makes you feel weird sometimes because it is a superpower, I guess you would call it, or an innate ability to perform under pressure. But in life, you want people like that around you, if that makes sense. Like, I don't think Jay-Z's happy being Jay-Z if he doesn't have Beyonce or other people with the same mindset around him, or even LeBron, or even anybody like a CEO of a company or a janitor of a company. If you don't have the same mindset of people around you, or a mindset that's higher than yours, that's going to pull you up there or force you to be better, it becomes a tough deal. Where I remember there were some kids at De La Salle that didn't want to personally be the best, and he used to rub me the wrong way. Then there was kids when I got to college that didn't want to be the best, right? And he used to rub me the wrong way. And those things, they, you have to learn how to deal with them, if that makes sense. You have to learn how to work with those people and work around those people in order to get to the objective goal. So it's tough, but it's definitely something that I'm happy I had.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I talk about, even, for me as a CEO or boss or whoever, I look at it, I talk about like having the smallest house in the nicest neighborhood, right? Like I always, I want to be the dumbest one in my friend group, right? Because that means I have most to learn. So I really like and appreciate that mindset, because you never have it all figured out. And I think if your goal is really to maximize your potential and be the best you can be, you need to surround yourself with those types of people.
No, it's funny you say that because I guess we can move on to college. Because I'll tell you, when I got to college, I had a chance to go to USC and a bunch of other schools.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember Eric Bieniemy, who we had a lot of conversations about at our dinner over at the Combine. He was the running back coach at UCLA, and there's one thing that he said to me that really made me want to go with him when he went there. Because first he was at Colorado. I committed to Colorado. I loved Colorado.
Yeah.
But he left and went to UCLA, which I still think, was a great decision on his part because it put me in a better situation for myself. But I was going to go to SC, and SC had one running back. They had Dennis, Herschel Dennis was the guy there, and they were bringing in Reggie Bush, Lindell White, and we were bringing in a younger class of backs. And that their sell was, look, everybody's on the same playing field. No one really has played. Like, you come here, we're going to get you right. You can compete, which is fine. But at the same time, they had me they actually wanted me to play defense because I was a safety in high school as well. And they were like, well, you could play both ways. And I didn't like that. I was like, I know what both ways means. That means like, we're going to put you where we want to put you. But when I got to UCLA, when I went to UCLA, they had 10 running backs there. They brought in, there was 8 of them. They brought in another guy with myself, and then they brought in Michael Petrie as well as a fullback. And so I remember Bieniemy going there and asking him like, yo, like, so what's the deal? Like, bro, like, you got 10 dudes. And he was like, well, if you're the best one, you're going to play. What you worried about, right? Like, that was like his straight answer. Like, you worried about it, or you like? And to me, it took me back to that 9-year-old person, right? Where I'm out, there's 150 kids, there's a bunch of people running around, to then go into De La Salle and trying to be this big fish in this big pond of this school that never lost, and carrying that legacy on throughout my time there, to now in college where it's like, okay, you want to challenge me? Like, I'm going to show you that I can do this with no problem.
Yeah.
Right. This is easy. And so there were some hiccups along the way. But that mindset of being comfortable, being uncomfortable, I felt like I had like I knew that there wasn't a lot of people like that. And I wanted to see if they had guys like that in this room.
Yeah.
And so when I went out there and, and competed, I was able to earn the second spot and play as a freshman, which was really exciting throughout the year, end up starting towards the end.
It's awesome. So let me back up to high school real quick. So as you go through De La Salle and you're playing for this powerhouse, you talked about how you wound up at UCLA, but at what point was it like junior year, you kind of burst on the scene, or like where all right, I got a shot? When you start thinking about, were you just thinking about getting to college, or were you like, hey, I'm going to the NFL?
Yeah. No, it's so funny. I was always in the moment. I never understood. First of all, I didn't even know college existed, right? I'm very naive I was very naive when it came to certain things, because my world was so small. Like, my world was Antioch youth football. Mm-hmm. My world was 3M track. My world was De La Salle high school and track. Like, it wasn't too much outside of that. And at that time, like, it wasn't a lot of being ranked, and no one knew about, like, the ranking system was just starting to come into place a little bit. And our school did a really, I don't know if you want to call it a really good job or if they did a poor job, but I necessarily wasn't thinking of like going out there and trying to get myself nationally known. I just wanted to play football. Yeah. And I love the game of football more than anything. And so when I remember it was my sophomore year, my freshman year, I was on JVs as a freshman. They sent me down the team. We had a really good team. We played really well. I played really well. I go from freshman to varsity right away. There were times throughout that varsity season, it was very up and down. I didn't play a lot. I did play a lot, right? There was games where I wouldn't play until the end of the game. There were games where I would start and go for 130 yards, 150 yards rushing, and then I would get benched again. Like, it was insane. Later to find out that they didn't like my confidence. So
they humbled you a little bit.
Yeah, they wanted to humble me a little bit. They wanted to break me, but that was never the case. But I remember a conversation I had at the end of my sophomore year with our defensive coordinator, who's still at the school now. And he was like, we had such high expectation for you, and yet you didn't meet that. Right. And it hit me because I'm like, I've always reached that expectation no matter what. For my first year of playing anything, I've always been, so I remember that offseason, I took that to heart and I went after it. I gained like 10, 15 pounds. I ended up running one of my fastest 100 times in track. And that summer, it was three backs. There was two seniors. I was a junior. And we were all playing defense. And that summer, I wanted to make sure that I earned a starting spot because there were some younger guys coming in that they really liked as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so that competitive environment kind of got created again for me. And throughout the season, we were kind of splitting carries. It was three of us. And then I played against the first ever national championship game against Long Beach Poly.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a big game, and the way the coaches did it, which I appreciate, they went with the hot hand. So if you were hot, you got the rock. Like it was period point blank. If you got hot, and so the first couple games of the year, I want to say that was like our fourth or fifth game. The first couple games of the year, I wasn't cooking like I needed to be.
Mm-hmm.
But like the game before that, or a couple games before this championship, I started getting my groove a little bit, and then I caught in a groove and had a really big game.
Yeah.
And that's when the national audience, it was all over TV. Still to this day, people will come up and be like, "Hey, I remember where I was when I watched you guys, and you guys did this." And it was like a national. And understand this, coming from a small town in Antioch, outside of Oakland, I never understood the concept of someone living in Austin, Texas, or someone living in Florida and like knowing me. I'd never, like, I only knew the people in my area, in my world, and that was it.
Mm-hmm.
So then after that, after having that game, I kind of got put on the map, and that's when Bieniemy offered me my first scholarship, maybe a couple months later after that. And again, I had a couple other offers come in. But that was kind of the game that like got me started, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So you get to UCLA, right? You said you ended up, was it second string as a freshman?
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about what the UCLA experience was like. And also just from a financial standpoint, right? We see kids with NIL today. What was
I
it?
Wish.
Yeah.
How
was life on campus?
Oh man. Well, okay. So first, before I get there, I got to tell you this story, right? So I played well my junior year. I'm ranked nationally at this point. I go through my senior year. I have I think I averaged like 10 yards a carry or 14 yards a carry or something. Like I had a terrific senior year. At least I thought I did. I only had 5 offers. I had Wisconsin, SC, Colorado, Cal, and Oregon. Those are my 5 offers, right? Which are really big offers. Don't get me wrong. Like those are good offers. I ended up getting invited to the Cal Florida Bowl, where they had like Ernie Sims, who got drafted in the first round. I mean, they on that Florida team, they probably had like 10 first rounders. It was insane.
Yeah, I know Ernie. He was like one of the biggest recruits.
Yeah, Ernie was big. They had Amp Hill. They had a couple other dudes that ended up getting drafted high. Like it was a lot of guys. It was the guys went to Miami, Florida State, LSU. Yeah, I mean, it was a loaded team. Well, and in that situation, where in that game, very similar to the Pauley game, I had a good one. So I came out of that game. I went in that game with 5 scholarships, and I came home the next day, and I had like every letter, every scholarship from every school in the country. It was insane. I came home, it was stacked like FedExes. And my mom was like, "Well, what are you going to do?" And I was like, "I'm going to go with the schools that were with me before this All-Star game, because like nothing changed, you know?" So I end up picking UCLA. I get there. First, my mom is working 2 jobs to try to, one job is paying the bills. The other one's to kind of put a couple of dollars in my pocket when I get to school. And it's funny because, Michael Petrie had like Pell Grants, and other kids had like financial aid. My mom made just too much money to get those things, but not enough to like, you feel me, to make sure that I was good. So she picked up a second and third job to help. And even then it would be like, $100 here. She would come and buy food or whatever it may be. They'd come and stock my room with groceries or snacks. But really, other than that, like, we were thugging it, like, you're trying to figure it out. And so on top of that, right, and this is before, I want to say, I forget what kid it was at UConn, that kind of the basketball player that was like, yo, we doing all this, and yet they're not even feeding us.
Yeah.
They're not feeding. And so that's what was going on. Like, we weren't getting fed like that either. Like, we would have training table, and then you'd have to eat dinner at a certain time. And if you missed dinner because you were studying or you're working out, like, you just out there. And so it was a very, very it taught you how to live, right? It taught you how to maneuver, how to, meet people, talk to people. We would have friends that would have extra swipes that would help us out, or, guys started learning ways to get around it. Whatever we had to do, we did. But you had to hustle, right? You learned to hustle, and you learned what it took. And it very similar to what I saw at De La Salle and what I saw early on in my football career. Some people had the art of hustle, some people didn't, right? Some people wanted it and some people didn't. You had to do what you had to do. And so it was a very interesting time. It was I appreciate my parents and my mom and my grandpa and my grandparents for really, giving me everything that I needed. Not that I wanted, but that I needed. And it kept me hungry, right? It kept me wanting more at the end of that. And so it's hard to go to school with like some kids that are driving like Escalades and some kids that are doing certain things. And then, you're just thugging it on campus. And I was lucky. My mom ended up becoming a real estate agent and making a lot of money. And she bought me like an Expedition or a Lexus at one point. And I had like that for a car after my freshman year. Right. And so, she taught me what hard work and sacrifice was like. And so I was able to kind of mimic a lot of what she was able to do in football, and be able to kind of support after that.
That's awesome. So as I think you were, when we talked, one of the things that struck me was how instrumental UCLA was to propelling you and Coach Bieniemy in general. Tell me a little bit about, as your career progressed, how he helped you and challenged you and some of the things.
No, I always tell people this, like, I think people come into your life for reasons, even if it's a season, it's a learning experience, and it's never a loss, I think Eric Bieniemy came in there to really harden me and get me prepared for what life is going to be like. There's a lot of ups and downs. There's a lot of different things. He wouldn't allow you to be satisfied to rest on your laurels. He never allowed that, right? He never allowed you to be okay with rushing for 100 yards, or he's always something. And I remember sitting in this meeting after I rushed for like 300 yards. I broke records and everything. Michael Petrie in there. And I thought we were going to go in and have a good day. Like, we're going to talk about all the positive stuff and we're going to be so positive today. No, he went in there and showed every run that I made a mistake on. And then that was the end of the film. That was it. And like, dudes are looking at me like, bro, like, you okay? And I was just like I remember him telling me like, bro, you could have rushed for 500 today after the game. And he was like, I'm going to show you. This is where you lost your money. Right. And so I appreciated him for that. There were some times that I didn't appreciate him because, as a kid, especially as an 18-year-old, 19-year-old kid, you want to feel appreciated. You want to feel loved. But he always made it very clear, like, the business that we're trying to go into is not about love. It's like, teams don't necessarily care about you unless you're producing, right? And you have to be able to understand that, and you have to be able to perform still at a high level. Mm-hmm. You still have to be able to be a professional and handle your business and do the things that you need to do. And so he prepared me, right? He prepared me for a long journey, man, a tough one. And I still to this day, like, I coach a very similar way to him, not as aggressive, you could say, but very similar, like, where I'm not going to allow our kids to, if we win, like the last couple of years, we've went undefeated and never lost in my 8th grade. I was coaching 8th grade ball. And last year was very tough because there was a lot of kids on the team where we did it beforehand. And so the natural instinct is to say, oh, we did it. Like, I don't have to work as hard,
Mm-hmm.
And so I would tell him like, no, that's the worst way to think. Like, you got to go even harder because we have a target on our back. And so it's good to be able to kind of talk to my oldest son about it and my youngest one about it. It's good to talk to like other kids about it, to explain them why it's so important to do these things, especially if your goal, because kids nowadays, and I'll bring it back, but kids nowadays, because of social media, they can see the NFL.
Yeah.
Right. They can see college in the 8th grade. You can see these different things because of the different ranking systems and companies. And see, I didn't have none of that. Like all I knew was I was playing with my football with my boys. I wanted to be the best. So if I was the best of my best friends who were all really good, then I should be okay. Where now they get to, my son is talking about a kid that he's competing with in LA and in Texas. And I'm like, bro, like that's insane. Like I couldn't even fathom that. Like I only knew about Reggie Bush in high school because of an all-star game, not because of anything else. And so, like now, like these kids have a different thing. So it's easier to see your competition, and it's easier to kind of rest on your laurels because you're like, oh, well, I'm ranked this. I don't need to work that hard. Like no, you should work 10 times harder. So, like I said, to me, it's been what he did for me, and I think what he did for a lot of guys at UCLA is prepare us for the real world, right? Even if it was not the NFL, if it was just regular workplace. Every dude that I know that was in that running back room is successful in some type of situation.
Yeah. And I think one of the things when you talk about being challenged, and I think like one of the things that struck me when we had that dinner was you talked about not everybody was up for that challenge, and not everybody was. So talk a little bit about how that weeding that out, because you had, so you don't have to get into all of them, but there were a couple pretty good stories.
Yeah. All right. So the thing with EB, Eric Bieniemy, was, you know, there was nothing. He always used to tell us like, I'll praise you when it's time to when you do good, and I'm going to criticize you when you do bad. He never told you that there was, in his mind, there was no good, right? And I think there were a lot of people. There are a lot of people that thought and hoped that, you know, they would get him the praise. Like that's what you would strive for him to praise you. And he broke people, man. Like he broke all of us. I remember my freshman year, like I was like, bro, I quit. I can't do this anymore. Like I remember being in a situation in camp as a freshman, and we were backed up where we got the ball on the 5-yard line, and it's a live drill, like to the ground. We're trying to tackle, and we're gonna figure this out. And I get the ball, and I'm running to the right, outside zone. I cut up, I cut back, I go 95, untouched, to the crib. You hear me? Like on, and mind you, that defense, this was against our starting defense. That defense was ranked 5th in college football. Yeah. Right? This was a terrific defense. And I come back and I'm like, yo, like I know you about to say something to me, like good stuff or something. You know what I mean? And he was like, hey, bro, you think you did good? Like, hey, you know, and he was like, hey, if you cut my run back again, something. And that point, I was like, I can't handle this, right? Like, I don't want to be like, I don't want to deal with this. And I remember calling my mom and telling her, like, I'm leaving, like, I'm quitting. And I ended up leaving for a couple of days, and somehow he swooned her and got her to get me back, you know? Mm-hmm. And that was his one. And then we had another guy who he just never could get right, man. Like, he was my roommate my sophomore year. He just never could get right. And I remember we'd be in practice. We'd be like warming up for practice. We'd have to go out for pre-practice. Mm-hmm. And he'd be like, I think I'm going to pull a groin today, or my hamstring's tight. And I'd be like, hey, bro, don't do that. Like, thug it out. You know, like we gotta fight through this. It's okay. It's all of us. We in this together. And he didn't care. He'd be like, I think I'm period 7. I'm going to pull my hamstring. I could feel it. You know, like this. And he never understood what he was trying to do. And I didn't understand until maybe a couple years ago, to be honest with you, what he was doing. It was like the enemy was putting us in such a high pressure situation that the easiest thing to do was to just fold and quit. Like that'd be like I tap out, right? It was very similar to like when you see our military, when they like ring the bell, mm-hmm. Like go ahead and break, go ahead and ring the bell, like quit on your team, you know? And I never wanted to be known as a quitter. So no matter how hard it was, I would just figure a way to mentally push myself through it. But like there were times, man, like I remember being in meetings. I remember him calling guys out. Like the scariest thing to ever do with Bieniemy was to be put on the board. That was the worst thing in the world. Like I told him, I could run, I could push stuff. I had a little issue with rolling, but other than that, like anything physical I could do. Like, but to have that ability to be able to go on the board, know that your boys are around you watching, know that he's gonna nitpick at everything you do if the footwork isn't right, if it's not, and to go on there in those situations and to be confident enough to do it and not make a mistake. Right? Like that's what we were prepared for. And so I remember, I would get text messages at like 8 o'clock at night, like meet me at Drake Stadium. Somebody messed up, somebody didn't do their job, get all the running backs here at Drake Stadium at 4:30 in the morning. No one better be late. And I'd be like, bro, well, what happened? And none of your business. Just get everybody there. And then I'd be texting dudes like, yo, hey, make sure you're there, because as a leader, right, it's my job to make sure everyone's there. And I'd be like, hey, yo, hey, we got to do this. Somebody messed up. And then guys wouldn't respond to the text. So I'd have to go knock on their dorm room. Yeah. I'd have to call, leave, everything. And, but again, it was about accountability. It was about performing under pressure. It was about all these other things that happen in life. And so he had his own unique way of doing it, but he also made us very successful doing it if you were able to push through it. Now, most guys, I remember one time my freshman year, we had a guy just quit. Like, I can't do this anymore. And then you just see him skateboarding up and down campus. Like, he didn't want to play no more. We had other dudes like just tap out and quit. Like, football is not for me. Right. And it to me, it was so mind boggling to know that, my first love, and I was hoping that it was everyone else's first love. How could that happen? How could someone take that joy away? Because of some hard work, but yeah. Like I said, everybody was different. No, a lot of people don't like to be uncomfortable. A lot of people don't like challenges. A lot of people, they just don't want to go about their day. And to me, that's kind of a black and white day. I like color, right? I need something to go with it. And so Bieniemy brought a ton of color with it for sure.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And I think you said one other thing, about your time at UCLA. I think you had said, we were talking about Coach Bieniemy, I think you said you were never more prepared for games than when he was coaching you.
We were always prepared. Like he's OCD on it. I mean, we would have tests this thick of every play that was in the playbook versus every defense, and you'd have to draw it out. And I want to say my second year as a leader of the team, because we had a guy by the name of Emmanuel White who was like our oldest. He was a senior and I was a sophomore. Manny White would do the test and then everyone would copy him just to make sure it was right. But I never did that. I was like, I'll do the test on my own because I want to make sure that I'm prepared to play and I know what I'm doing. And so what it did was I would check it with Manny, but it forced me to be like on my toes. So if anything were to happen, I knew how to slide over to it. I knew how to check the protection. I knew the routes to run because at that time I was playing a little receiver as well. And so it was like insane. And to see guys panic, right? To see guys like not do so well was weird because, again, all this was happening because football was my first love. So everything that came with it, right? So if it was the test, if it was the running, the extra conditioning, if it was the scoring in practice, if it was the 4:30 a.m. rolls, I did all that because I knew if I didn't do it, it would affect me playing in games. And so, but what I tell people all the time, I remember getting drafted by Jacksonville, and we ran a very similar offense to Jacksonville at the time, to most people in the league, pretty much, because everybody ran like the West Coast around that time in the league. The spread wasn't out, and most of that was in college as well. When I got to Jacksonville, the reason I was able to get on the field is because I understood protections and I understood the playbook. So when I got drafted, there was already 8 dudes there. And very similar to UCLA, I had to jump as many of them as I could to get there. But part of the reason I could jump it was because I understood the game. I understood the playbook. I was so prepared at UCLA that when I got to the NFL, or when I was at the combine and coaches are putting me on the board, and I'm with coaches I don't even know, right? I remember being in meetings with Tony Dungy, and he's like, hey, let's go on the board real quick, blah, 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 blah. and I go on the board and I'm like, or I'm in the Jets and they're showing me every negative play that I had in college, and they're trying to get me, and I'm just like, and I was like, yeah, those are the three, those are all the negative plays I've seen, and like, you know what I'm saying, like that's all it was. I don't. You seem like you got them all. Like this is what it is, to try to mess with you. And so, to me, I was so prepared, and he did such a great job preparing all of us for the next situation, the next things going forward. That it just became second nature, right?
Yeah.
The pressure that he put on you, the stress that you thought you had became second nature, because at the end of the day, I was dealing with that at 18, 19, 20 years old. So by the time I got to the NFL, understanding defenses, understanding offense, understanding, the hierarchy of how things go and what is expected, I'd already went through that.
That's awesome. And one of the things is we talk about kind of the NFL now. One of the things that I think that you said, and I think that's overlooked so many times by not only athletes, but people in life, is the importance of the little things. Like you said, you got on the field, and a lot of guys extend their career not based on explosive talent, but on their ability to understand detail and do the little things. So as as you finish at UCLA and you feel prepared for the draft, tell me a little bit about getting drafted by Jacksonville and the money, and kind of what was your first big purchase, and how did you kind of handle the money in the beginning?
Yeah. Let's see. So I get drafted by Jacksonville. Well, I'll tell you my first big lesson first before I get to all that. So it's through the combine process. I run 4.3. I test well. I jumped like a 36 or 37-inch vertical. I did everything that you needed to do, caught the ball well, ran routes, killed the pro day. I did everything. And it's a week before the draft, right? Now, mind you, I'm projected to go anywhere from 15 to 32, right? Which I'm excited about. I'm like, bro, there's a 5 or 6 team that need backs in the NFL. Like, I'm all for it. Like, let's go to work. And I end up going out with some buddies, celebrate a birthday. We end up at a restaurant. Fight breaks out. Guy says I hit him. Didn't even touch the guy. I don't even know the guy. But at the time, my name had been pretty big. And so he was going after the deepest pockets. And right then and there, that lesson, I dropped from going in potential, top 15 to 32 to 60. And lost out on a lot of endorsement deals, lost out on a lot of money. And so when I did get drafted, it wasn't even like that feeling that you should feel. You know what I mean? It wasn't like that, like, oh, we've changed everyone's lives. And, it was like, I got to now go back out there and show everyone who I really am. Right. And go out there and make sure that I, clear my name and do all these things and perform at a high level and be a professional. So when I did get drafted to Jacksonville, first purchase was a house. I bought a house in Jacksonville, not knowing how long I was going to be there or not, but I was planning on being there forever, for a long time. I lived in that house for 9 years. And really that was it. Like, I rented a car. Like, I had a lease on a car. Like it wasn't like like, other than that, it was that and video games. Like, that's all I did. I played video games. I worked out, and I went to and from where I needed to go to.
Awesome. And how did you, from the standpoint of the game, right? I think you got a lot on the field your first year, special teams, that kind of thing. Tell me about, you talk about being overlooked constantly and having to fight your way. So tell me about kind of.
Yeah, no, the competition aspect of it was, I remember, I played a lot of offense. I played a ton of offensive snaps. When I got to Jacksonville, there's a rule too. There used to be a rule. I don't know if the rule still exists now, but if you're a junior, you can't go to your team until you graduate. Well, UCLA doesn't graduate till like June. So I missed all of OTAs.
Well, I didn't know that.
I didn't go to no OTAs. And then I did mini camp, and I did some rookie stuff. And then I had gained a bunch of weight because we were doing like a a certain type of lift, like my body. And this is when you start to learn how your body is. Cause we weren't doing free weights. We were doing machines.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just like bulking up. Like I went from 208 pounds dunking, right, in a matter of months. And like, I want to say like 2 months to 225 and couldn't move.
Oh, wow.
And so I ended up leaving Jacksonville and coming back to the Bay Area and finishing out the off season here with one of my trainer from high school who was at the University of Cal.
Mm-hmm.
And I lost probably like 17 to 20 pounds in a matter of like weeks, like 3 weeks, like eating a certain way, working out, like whatever I had to do so I can get back flexible and being able to move. So I end up doing that. I get out there, I perform well throughout training camp, understand the playbook was big because I became the third down back. So I could protect, I could do all these different things. And you know, I performed pretty well in the preseason. I remember the first regular season game was against the Dallas Cowboys. I remember like it was just Terrell Owens. They had all these guys on their team, right? And I remember picking up a blitz, and one of my boys that I grew up with, his cousin was Roy Williams. And I remember picking up a blitz and hitting them. And Roy at the time was the best safety in the game. Like he was up there with Sean Taylor, he was like one of the top. And so
yeah, he was good.
I remember the protection. I remember seeing the defense, and it was like I had wrote this defense up multiple times throughout college. Like I knew exactly what was going to happen. Then I was doing the same thing in the league. So I was able to go there and pick it up. And that's kind of when our team felt like, you know, that they could trust me enough to pick up blitzes.
Mm-hmm.
And so I picked it up. The next week, I want to say we played the Pittsburgh Steelers. We ended up winning that game like 9-0. And all I did was block in that game. It was just one of those nasty, you know, it was just a muddy game. It was a Jacksonville Pittsburgh game. And I remember being upset because I knew I was more than just a blocker. I knew I could perform. I like after doing certain things, my confidence was getting where it needed to be able to play at a high level. But I never wanted, I think we were 2-0 at the time. So I didn't want to like be an issue. Right. But at the same time, I was like, I need to show him I could touch this rock and make plays. And so we play the Colts the third game of the year, and I end up having a really big game against them. And so me, myself, and Fred Taylor, who was starting at the time, you know, he went out, did his thing. I came in and did mine right behind him. And that's when we kind of found our 1-2 punch after that. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that came from just being able to play fast, right? And playing fast came from understanding the offense and the defense, understanding what my role was on the team and how I could perform and help, and then excelling in that role, right? And then hoping that I would get a bigger role down the line. I ended up starting getting a bigger role as the season went on. And so it was exciting. It was very exciting. I was it was challenging for a lot of reasons. Like you're going against Peyton Manning and you're trying to outscore him and different guys on defense and whatever it may be. But I really enjoyed that time because it made me, especially my rookie year, made me really understand who I was going to be and what I was going to be, you know, and how I wanted to move forward.
So when you get that under your belt, tell me about that transition into kind of superstardom, right? Where you hit that window where you're as good as we have in the game. Kind of tell me about that journey and when you got there, what that feeling was like.
Well, so I tell people it was what I was used to, right? And I don't want to make it seem like, but I grew up. That's what I was in youth football. That's what I was in high school. That's what I was in college. Mm-hmm. It was more uncomfortable not being there, right? Than it was being there. Because I felt like I could still be myself, being that person. That's who I've always been. But I think the most important thing about when people start to hear about you and fantasy football becomes a big thing, and I'm a big part of fantasy football, and you know, people are starting to see your face and you're doing commercials. It's really, you know, you got to continue to be who you are. Mm-hmm. And for me, I just played video games and sat at home. Like I just kicked it. I've never been into cars. I've never been into clothes. I've never been into different things. I was a video game dude. Right. And so I had the best internet. I had the best video games, the best chair, best setup of that. and that's what I spent my money on. I mean, I would have car deals where I would get cars for free and stuff like that and do commercials, but like I never spent money on anything but that. And that was something that saved me in the long run, is because I never had that. Like I said, everything that I wanted to do and everything that I did was about football. Right.
Yeah.
So I never really had interest outside of that.
Yeah.
But video games. Right. And so as I started my family, like it just kept me grounded and able to kind of do what I needed to do.
Yeah. So when we know, that's not what a lot of guys do, and I'm sure you saw some teammates do some egregious things. What are some of the things that you saw guys doing, and did you ever kind of try to say, "Hey, listen, what are you doing, man?" Like,
I mean, you see the chains, like guys spending hundreds of $1,000s on chains, guys buying crazy cars, guys, whatever it may be, if it's, this, you see a lot, and it's I didn't really say anything until like year 5, because at that time I'm not the leader of the team, right? I'm still year 4. Like year 4 is when I become the leader of the team. And before I leave, before I start telling people like be careful with your money, I want to serve you, I want to help you, right? I want to be able to serve. Like that's why leaders are servers, right? I want to make you better. I want to challenge you, I want to push you and do certain things. And then when guys started coming to me with advice, I would always tell them like, bro, like, what do you need all those chains for? Right? Like, people know who you are. You're like, if anything, I would need the chains. I'm 5'7", right? I look like a normal person when I go places. You know what I'm saying?
yeah.
But you're 6'4", 250 pounds. Like, no one looks like you in the city. You know what I mean? But I would always tell guys, like, whatever you want to do or whoever you are, this money is going to enhance it. You know what I'm saying? Like, so if you like women, you finna have all the women when you get this money, which is going to burn it, because you're trying to take them out and do all this stuff. If you like jewelry, you have all the jewelry. If you like cars, you'll have all the cars. If you like whatever, this money is going to enhance whoever you are. If you like to gamble, right? Like I've seen people lose car notes, like literally pink slips or whatever they do now for cars, like hand it over. You know what I'm saying? Because you lost so much money on it. And so I always tell guys, like, and I remember my agent used to tell me this all the time. Like, you're on the back end of your career once you get to the league. Like, you only got, unless you're playing quarterback, and even then, some quarterbacks, I mean, now they're playing 20 years, but back then guys were playing 12 to 15, right? And you got to think, I've been playing football since I've been 9, so I'm going to play 9 more years. I'm going to be 29 when I retire. I have my whole life ahead of me to do all these different things and find different interests. Like, I want to have that nest to be able to go and be able to be prepared for it.
Yeah, absolutely. So you were always thinking about the game after. So you go through Jacksonville, and quick question on Jacksonville. What would you say between there and Oakland? Like, what was your best game or your favorite memory that you have, or the game where you're like, man, this was.
I mean, there's a lot of them. I always go back to just going to the playoffs. I think I only went to the playoffs once in my career, and that environment was insane. I only can think about what it would be like to go further into the playoffs, right? But we won in Pittsburgh, which was a big deal. And I want to say the next year Pittsburgh won the championship too. Like, it was like, but we got after them in that game, and we had a really good team to go and win it all. We stumbled against the Patriots. That was the year I think the Patriots went undefeated and lost to the Giants. That we had them beat in New England and just stumbled it away. But yeah, like I said, it was that probably the game in Pittsburgh was probably the best. I mean, I had a pretty good game there, but more than anything, it was a team victory. Like, my boy that I played high school with, I told you about, Derek Landry.
Yeah,
he got drafted to Jacksonville. So I had a high school buddy that I played with in those times with me, which was nice, So those were exciting times.
That's awesome. So as your career is kind of winding down, you go back home. Tell me about that last year and that opportunity to go.
Yeah, that was if I can't say I regret it, because I always wanted to play for I grew up a Raiders fan, so I always wanted to play for the Raiders. But I felt like I could have played longer. a lot of it was I was being from California and living in Florida for 10 years. Was tough, right? Not seeing my family all the time, my wife not seeing her family all the time. People flying in and out. It just as much as I love Jacksonville, it just didn't feel like home to me, right? And it wasn't a place where, it's a great place to raise a family. It just wasn't for me, right? I wanted to come back to be where I wanted to be. And so anyways, I have a choice between 2 or 3 teams. Probably should have went to Pittsburgh, because if I'd have went to Pittsburgh, I probably would have played 5 more years, would have been perfect, right? And I could have been done.
Yeah.
But I chose to come home because, there was certain people in my family that weren't, kind of coming on their last leg, and I wanted them to see me play. I go back into a situation where I'm competing again for a spot because they had Darren McFadden. And again, that's where I was most comfortable, where there was the unknown. Like, can I beat him out? Darren's younger than me. He's bigger. He's faster, supposedly, all these different things. And he's a great guy, and it was a great competition. It was awesome. But at the same time too, being home wasn't the best.
Yeah.
If that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Just, people pulling at you, just different things that I never had to worry about because I was all the way across the country. Now I'm dealing with it, my kids being, put in different situations because of, what I did here as a high schooler, and then now back as a pro. Right. So, it just, that wasn't what I was excited about. Right. It didn't get me. And then it kind of at the end of it, I didn't play for a couple weeks. I got hurt, and it just kind of started to spiral downhill a little bit. And I was like, you know what, I'm just going to get out while I'm healthy. And so that's kind of just how it ended. It wasn't no fairy tale ending. It just kind of just was that. And I hate that I did that, because I had an opportunity to go to Kansas City with the enemy.
Yeah.
But I also know who I am. I also know that, after you make so much money and you start to, a certain amount of money, you're not going to let people talk to you a certain way. And I knew how he talked to people. So I was kind of like, he was like, no, it ain't going to be like that. Like, I was like, but, I probably should have took that and did that, to be honest with you. But, at that time I was comfortable. Like, people always tell you hindsight is 20/20, right? Like, now thinking about it, I probably should have took that and played like 4 or 5 more years. I had so much more football left in me. But at the same time, I didn't want to get hurt either, right? Where I couldn't, I didn't have that. I only had like 2 or 3 surgeries, right? Where I'm able to run around with my kids and walk and work out and do different things that I probably wouldn't have been able to do if I would have kept playing at that level. So, it was a little catch. It was a catch-22, but it didn't end the way I wanted it to. Which is fine, but it was a life lesson. It was a lesson in general where I'm able to pass it down to my kids and other kids. Like, as they go to the NFL, like, there's kids that I coach now, that are in the NFL going through this process. And I literally have told them, like, hey, like, make them kick you out of this thing, make sure that you're done playing football. Right. So that you don't have like the regret and the different things that other people that I had, at the end of it. So.
And I think, to your point, but I think the beauty of it is you had what a lot of people don't have and you had the freedom financially to make that decision, right? So tell me a little bit, is kind of as we wrap up, talking about just one of the things you struck me was about how difficult that transition was post-career and some of the things going on there. So tell me a little bit about that once you make the decision.
Yeah. I mean, so we're at dinner, obviously. I had talked to my boys about it because these are guys that I trust, guys that were in my wedding, guys that came to my wedding, whatever it might have been. And I remember talking to them like, yo, like, I wish I had the want to coach at that level, because when you retire, you learn that there's 24 hours in a day. You learn that there's so much more than just football, because for my whole life, from 9 to 29, for 20 years, all I've had was certain structure, right? Every day I had to do a certain thing to prepare myself to be the best I could be for Saturdays, Sundays, or Fridays. And I had literally someone telling me what to do every day. Like I paid a guy in the off season to tell me what to do, when to be there, what, you know what I'm saying? Like, so I always had structure, always had things going on. And so when you retire, you don't have that, right? Or at least I didn't have that. And I remember I remember the day I retired, it was like a breath of fresh air. Like I could just kind of exhale, and all the pressure that I had on me just left. Like I sent out this tweet, like it's over, I'm done, whatever. But through that process, I would always tell myself, like, man, I always used to tell myself, like, you play football, football isn't you, right? Like you're not, football isn't just you, but it was a lie. I was lying to myself because I was so enamored and so in love and so like immersed in just football that I had to do it. So I get this job at the network, NFL Network, and I'm working and I'm doing all these things, but I don't feel fulfilled, right? I don't feel happy. I'm sad all the time. Like, my kids are around and I love them, but it just wasn't right. It was weird. It's something I never felt before. And so what ended up happening, I just became crazy depressed at the end of the day, and like just nothing was ever good enough. And what I found out was I just needed to find like something new, a new challenge, something new to do, right? That became traveling. That became, going to see different things and traveling to different places. That became, coaching my kids in a certain aspect of it. That became, doing all these things. And it's so insane because you hear this thing, like you hear the people always tell you like money doesn't, make you happy. Right. And I always hear people say, yeah, but I won't be as sad. Like, no. You'll be very sad. Right. Like now don't get me wrong. Like if I didn't have money, I'd probably be much worse. Right. If I didn't save my money and didn't, protect those type of things, yeah, I'd probably be really messed up. But we always have to have purpose. And that was the one thing that I realized, like just staying in that same routine of things became like, I just felt like I was on autopilot for a long time.
Yeah.
And so finally I come out of autopilot. I start doing different things, start learning different things, start trying different things. And
how did you cut? What was that process like? Because one of the things you mentioned, you talked about, like you would be up like for a long
time. Like so I ended up going to therapy, which helped out a lot. At first, it doesn't feel like it helps because you just dig deeper. Like they're digging into places that you've kept locked for so long, like different traumas or different things. But you start to realize who you are, right? And there were times where, I'd be up 4 or 5 days in a row, not sleeping. And then I would crash for like 2 days, right? Or it'd be, there'd be times where I'd wake up. Like I remember going on for a drive one night just because driving would help me clear my head. And I woke up and I was in like, and what I mean by woke up, like I came to, not that I was asleep, but I was just like thinking, but so all my mind was running, and I come to, and I'm in San Diego from LA. And I'm like, what am I got work in like 3 hours. I got to hurry up and get back to LA and get showered and get to work, I mean, and so what I found out was like, learning is always the number one thing. Reading and I used to hear, I think Will Smith said it in one of his little things that he always talks about motivational things. He was like running and reading, right? Running because there's that person that's always in the back of your mind that tells you to stop. If you can defeat that person, he was like, you'll be strong enough to handle anything. And he was like reading because anything that you've been through, somebody in this world has been through, and they've written it down, and they can help you get through those things. And so I started to pick up different books and read them, started working out again. But that didn't help, right? Because I still have nights where it wouldn't be 5 nights, it'd be 2 nights, like it was better, but how much better is 2 nights of not sleeping, right? Of being wide awake and can't sleep. And so I just had to find purpose, and whatever that purpose was, if it was traveling, if it was, making sure my kids get to reach their goals or whatever it may be, that had been it. But I thought I had tried everything, man, like therapy. Like I didn't do medicine because I don't believe in medicine. I feel like I have to overcome my own issues, if that makes sense, right? Like these are things that I created, I have to be able to overcome, or these are things that have happened to me, I have to be able to defeat them in order to move forward. And I don't blame anyone else. I like that was the other thing that I did a lot of was I did a lot of blaming early on. Because you don't want to believe that you've dealt with stuff. And like I said, playing football, I was able to sweep everything under the rug because I always had football to go to. When my grandpa passed away, I had football to go to, right? When my parents split, I had football to go to. When I didn't do this, I had football to go to. I always had that was my outlet all the time. And so now, sometimes it's traveling, sometimes it's different things. But I realize like your purpose, you have to have your purpose to do things and what you want to do. And if you have to make that choice of what you want to do. Right. And so, like I said, therapy was awesome because the lady I had, we had some tough ones, man. Like, and she would always tell me like, it ain't your fault. Like, or she'd like, it is your fault, or that ain't on you, or, and so, and the one thing I learned from that is it's okay to go through all these different emotions, all these different feelings. It's okay to feel that way. You're not alone. A lot of people go through those things. They feel the same way you feel. They do certain things. And so I just think, that was something that helped me to know that I wasn't alone going through it. And that, I had certain guys that I could lean on and talk to about it. And, now it's like, I don't think you ever get all the way out of it because there's so much, you know what I mean? But you learn to take the good with the bad, right? You learn to see the positive in certain situations, in certain things. And, man, like I said, it's been a heck of a ride.
Yeah, absolutely. And last thing, tell me about the travel, because I know that's a big thing for you.
Yeah.
For yourself. What have you learned kind of traveling and how has that helped you?
Yeah, so it's funny. My cousin always wanted to travel, but I never was a big travel person. I was scared to travel because of football. I never wanted to do anything to mess up football. But I love traveling. I'm a history major, so I get to see so much history, so many different things. And I enjoy like seeing the culture, the people, tasting the food, the music. I've been to all over South America, Egypt, South Africa, Dubai, all through Europe. I had a trip planned to Thailand and Cambodia and Singapore in the next week, but I had to cancel it just because I have some stuff I have to do here. But it is an outlet because it allows you not to kind of get out of the rat race of what we're doing here, right? It allows you to kind of decompress a little bit, which I think is important. And whichever way you do it, I just do it by traveling, but to decompress and see different things and to feel different things and kind of get perspective on different things, right? Like I'm going through issues and I go to Peru and there's kids running around with no shoes on, shirt ripped up, you know what I'm saying? And I'm staying in a 5-star hotel, right? Like how can you stay upset and things like that at that? But I think, and I also think this too, like, people talk about it, like as men, we change every, I think I don't know if it's in our 20s or in our 30s, but you start to realize and you start to feel and see different things. Like I never felt and understood people and never cared to, you know what I mean? In my 20s. But as I got to my 30s, I started to feel more and I started to see more and I started to see some of the things that I did in my past, how they affected people and it affected me in that way. Right. And so I think, that was just a whole learning lesson, or an opportunity to learn from it and to try to move on and grow. And so I would use these times when I would travel to sit down. There'd be days where I wouldn't do anything on those days. I'd just be in a different country in a hotel room or somewhere, on a tour, and I'd be thinking about life and kind of what happened. And it's allowed me to kind of, I would say digest the things that I need to and flush the things that I need to. But also the things that I'm still working through to continue to work through them. And so it's definitely helped me. And so if people that are listening, try it. enjoy it. Find a place to go. And I'm not saying like don't go to Jamaica and go to the beach, or don't go to like no. Like go somewhere that's challenging, that's tough, that you normally wouldn't go to, and see how that is.
Right, because that's where the growth is. Bring the conversation full circle, right? In that uncomfortable place.
Yes.
Well, where can people find you? I know you do analyst stuff. You're coaching.
Yeah. So right now I'm a radio. I do radio. I call the games on radio for the Rams. I work at NFL Network, so I'll do like a lot of their coverage stuff. And then really, in all honesty, like my oldest son's going into high school. My daughter's in competitive cheer. I kind of haven't been around as much with work and different things. So I'm kind of cut back and really dive into being a dad and a husband, man. I think that's the finding joy in that, which is always exciting, and watching my kids and seeing how they love to do what they do. Awesome.
Well, Maurice, I really, really appreciate the time. This has been awesome. I think people will really enjoy it. So I appreciate you coming on the podcast, man.
No problem at all, man. I appreciate you for having me.
All right. Thank you, man.